Welcome back to Dear CC, where we look at how to help you get hired in the AI era. I'm really excited to start a new format today, and I've invited Ghael Fobes from our Gen Z advisory board and our production team to join me because he is a recent grad, and we thought that we could look at the different news items that have been coming out of social media, of mainstream media, and have an interesting discussion about them. Gael, maybe take a moment first to introduce yourself and tell people what drew you to the New Work Foundation.
Yeah, so well, one, I'm so excited to be here. My background is in TV news. I was a producer over at NBC covering politics, and then about 3 or 4 years ago, I started feeling like, you know what, this AI stuff might like begin to play a little bit more of a role in how we do our job as journalists, and then ultimately kind of got more and more involved, and have been really focused and interested in how do we govern these technologies, how do we talk about these technologies and our relationships to them, and sort of how that all plays out in politics, but also just kind of like society writ large. So some stuff that's really been interesting to me, and obviously this foundation is tackling these exact issues right now.
Well, it's really great to have you on the team, and I think it's useful to have us. I know we don't agree on everything, and that's such an important part of us figuring out the solution is hearing perspectives. You're in DC, I'm in San Francisco, you're in your 20s, I'm in my 40s, and let's figure this out together.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at some of these clips. It's been a busy month of news, and some of these are kind of really tackling at some of the big issues that we've been looking at.
How many jobs would you say you applied to overall?
I would say thousands, maybe, yeah.
Thousands?
A lot of, yeah.
Probably like 40, 50s.
I think I have applied to at least like 700 jobs.
Definitely over 100.
I would say probably over 40, 50-ish. And I would say I only got like 3 interviews and then got 2 offers. So, it's a numbers game, but I got really lucky and I felt grateful.
So, what were your kind of initial thoughts just listening to what some of these graduates had to say?
Well, first of all, I really feel for everyone who is graduating and a recent graduate. This is exactly why we started the New Work Foundation and DRCC. It really resonates with me and the core of what our mission is. I think that there are a few things going on. I mean, one is we know the stats. There are significantly fewer white collar entry level jobs available versus 12 months ago and versus 24 months ago. And there have been research studies published at Stanford, most recently also confirmed by the US Census Bureau, that the reason these entry level jobs is disappearing is directly traced back to AI use. So I think that we need to address this information asymmetry and also the lack of preparedness that people have when, in school. We'll talk about this later. Students are being actively told not to use AI. And yet to get hired, you have to be an AI expert and a practitioner. So we have to help address this gap.
Your point about not using it and then use like the fact that the jobs of today are asking for these skills, but in many ways, the freshmen who just graduated, they I mean, to think that the ChatGPT was really only announced publicly the beginning of their freshman year. And so I mean, what we've seen just over the course of their academic experience was just a completely sort of life-changing technology. And a lot of these institutions are really still trying to grapple with how do we institute rules, how do we institute policies, how do we institute some sort of safeguards to make sure that like we understand what it's doing, and also we understand the limitations and the possibilities that the technology has.
Well, that's right. And I mean, I think it is harder. We should acknowledge that we can do a lot to prepare people with information, with upskilling and tools, but it is harder. Revelio Labs, which provides granular data specifically for entry level jobs, they show that the contraction in the number of jobs is structural, not cyclical, and that the number of entry level white collar job postings in the US have fallen 35% since the start of 2023. So there are just fewer to go around, and while that's true, we can also do more to help people prepare for the ones that are available still.
Yeah. Let's go to the our next clip here. Just really getting a little bit more granular on the use of AI in college and like what the sort of differences in experience that some people might have.
People like this misconception where they're like, oh, yeah, all these students had to go through college and they weren't allowed to use AI. No, they are. In certain classes, it depends on the professor, it depends on the field. But in the STEM fields, pretty much everything outside of humanities, and not even all of humanities, not even the entire humanities department at my college that I teach at and am going to grad school at, not all, even all of them agree. All of the creative writing professors agree. We are anti AI, but that's not even the case in other humanities departments. And that's the thing that blows my mind, that baffles me, is because you would think a logical person, right? If you're not in academia, you would think, yeah, of course you're in college, you can't use AI, like you shouldn't be allowed to. And I agree. I agree you should not be allowed to use AI. Yet they are. They are. And I was so surprised because I remember I was talking to one of my students about it, and she was like, oh yeah, my other classes, like they want us to use it. They teach us how to use it. It's mind-boggling. It's crazy. Like I don't know, it's a huge problem. It's such an issue. And that's why we have all of these now college commencement speeches where the people in power are like, yeah, we love AI.
It's highly inconsistent. I mean, you heard not just across different schools, but within the same school, even within the same department, every professor has a different take on it. Um, and I think that it's a mistake to think about AI as a binary question of like you're either using AI or you're not using AI. The truth is that it's good to teach and encourage students to use AI with guardrails and to understand how to work with AI and become an excellent prompter and set up agents, but not use it to fully automate your homework. So it's understanding that balance, and also the fact that AI is constantly changing. You could write an AI policy that makes a lot of sense today, and in 2 weeks it'll be completely outdated.
I mean, I'm in a program that is data and AI ethics, and the differences between one professor and another, some carte blanche, you cannot use it at all on any assignment. Others encourage it. Others say, part of doing this education is experimentation, and it's testing out some of these systems. I will say, for some of the people that I'm closest to who belong in the humanities, my dad is an English professor. My closest friends were English majors. I think they have real issues with the sort of foundational corpus of a lot of these technologies. That they have issues that a lot of this information was scraped. As a journalist, I have, I think, my own concerns about, like, what does copyright look like in a world of AI, and a lot of those questions are kind of still being litigated. But I think the leaders that kind of speak to those foundational concerns are gonna be the ones that are gonna have the most success generally. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of inconsistency, I think, in terms of like how we're defining the problem. It really kind of differs from person to person.
And I think you're even pulling apart 2 separate issues. One
Yeah.
question is, does AI help or hinder learning and critical thinking? That is a big question that we need to answer. There's a separate question on the morals and ethics of using stolen works or
Yeah.
partially stolen works, and so I think for us to think through those. I was back at Stanford recently giving a talk, and the students were telling me about the AI policies from their various classes, and I thought it was really interesting that at least some professors have started testing different ways of focused work without AI, requiring, for example, students to handwrite their written assignments in class where they're
Yeah.
supervised and no devices are allowed. So that's a good way to ensure that AI isn't being used. And then on the other hand, for certain other classes where it's actually encouraged that the students use AI, but they have to submit not just the final output of their code, but the entire history of how it prompted and refined the output, because the professor is actually looking at that thinking process and working with AI versus the actual output.
Yeah, I know it's really fascinating approaches. I mean, Berkeley Law School, basically laid out all the different limitations and all the restrictions, and it was effectively saying you should not be using this tool.
Yeah, so that's an extreme view. So I'm against extreme views because you don't want to disallow entirely, and you also don't want to blanket allow, because basically you're encouraging everyone to automate their homework, which defeats the purpose of going to college.
I'm in agreement with you, right? Because it's that Berkeley's like what we see is when people have to use a tool quietly or they lie, right, in disclosures of whether or not they use the tool. Like you might be encouraging a different type of approach that I think might be really dangerous. You're also seeing like Princeton recently had an announcement, and there are many universities that kind of fall under this, where they now have to proctor in-person exams because they really kind of worry about these use cases. And I also think that asking people to handwrite essays is also probably not the best exercise of their intelligence, because the point of writing an essay too is that you get to kind of mull over your ideas, and being put under a time constraint of 2 hours, for some people, like, their best ideas are not going to be strung together in that really kind of strict time constraint. Now, maybe then we have kind of a different analysis of like, how do we properly assess people under these criteria? But I think it's really kind of fascinating, like a real new frontier for academia. Not to say anything about like, how do we prepare people to go into the workforce if they've never used any of these technologies to begin with?
Completely. And I also disagree with I'll disagree with another point that she made about how it's important to ban AI for creative writing, but it might be okay in STEM. In STEM, you go to college to learn critical thinking. And just like when you're writing, there's this whole creative process where it forces and changes your brain to have to put pen to paper and come up with a story and write the words. The same happens in code. And the way to become a really good software engineer, even an AI engineer, that ultimately your job is to review code, is you first need to do practice thousands of hours of writing that code manually from scratch. And so I think what she said actually applies to every major, where there are going to be certain tasks, certain assignments where we kind of have to have the discipline as universities and as students to kind of force ourselves to put in the work and really master it before we can become AI reviewers, which essentially is going to be every job out there.
Yeah, I think that that particular worry about de-skilling, or even skilling to begin with, right, is going to be the sort of the biggest unanswered question here. Um, how do you train people to evaluate the work of a machine when they themselves don't know how to do the work, right? And I think that, I mean, that's the $1 million answer that every type of professor and workflow expert is trying to get a handle on. Okay, so the next clip here is from someone who, um, their experience is not unlike those of many people we've heard from and many people we've seen on various social channels.
I am 24 hours away from being homeless. I'm unemployed, 41, and I'm single. But this is the first time that I have completely let go of everything. All 5 fingers have been released from the cliff, and I'm kind of doing a trust fall. I leave for New York in the morning. I'll be there for 3 weeks, and I have no idea what's next. I've applied for over 1,000 jobs, and I've had 3 interviews. And if another person tells me to optimize my resume, I might have a stroke.
That is heartbreaking, and I think it speaks to a bigger issue that's related to all of this job change, which is around mental health. I mean, already our college graduates have been entering an economy where housing is unaffordable, education is unaffordable, and this is just one more thing that, people who did everything right and are trying to do everything right. So I think just having empathy, and we need to address the mental health aspect of this too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is so true, and that oftentimes, the process of applying for a job, just, I mean, if you think about it, many of these kids who have just graduated college, you have just been in a community in person more often than not with your peers. You have a support system. People will be continuing to apply for jobs throughout the summer, and suddenly they've lost that support network in college. And depending on what people's kind of family situations are, it might be the question you get asked every single day by someone in the grocery store, or maybe it's your friend's parent that says, "Congrats, you graduated. What are you doing after graduation?" It is just it is a constant thing, and I think learning how to build community is something that kind of everybody has to do individually, but also like that organizations like ours are really going to be prioritizing. And then that's something that I think is really important, to know that you're not going through this alone, that in many ways, um, you've done everything right, and it's the system has to find a way of adapting.
I really want to figure this out. I mean, this is the story also of our co-founder, Samantha. I mean, she graduated from UC Berkeley 2 years ago, double major with honors. She interned at Tesla and Warner Brothers, and she was unemployed for a year, applied to over 1,000 jobs. And in episode 1, she talks about how she started to question her own identity. I mean,
Yeah.
after being a high achiever her entire life, good grades, student athlete, all these extracurricular activities, all of a sudden it kind of shook her to her core, and she felt embarrassed, and, no one should feel embarrassed. Everyone we need to come together, be open and vulnerable, build community, and then help people get jobs.
Yeah. One of the best pieces of advice and perspective I ever got from a mentor was right as I was graduating undergrad, he let me know that I was asking him like what was the biggest change going into the job market, and he said that you go from a place where you're getting pretty regular feedback and evaluation, and you have metrics, right? You have a semester is a pretty defined period of time, you have tests, you have exams, and all of a sudden, like, the world can become really kind of amorphous and organic, and you have to sometimes build that structure for yourself. And all of that stuff is stuff that we really want to tackle.
I thought your point was very interesting too about going from in person and being on campus, maybe living in a dorm or very close to campus with friends, to suddenly being out on your own. And even if you get hired, a lot of those jobs are hybrid or fully remote. And so you have
Yeah.
to build in not only the time structure, but also the human connection structure to make sure that you're not just in front of Zoom all day long.
Right, because in some ways, like, applying for a job, I mean, it's a trope now. It's its own full-time job, but it's also the sort of full-time job that doesn't give you anything kind of really exciting to talk about necessarily, right? It's like someone's gonna ask you, "What have you been up to today?" And it's just like, "Well, I'm on application 180." And in some ways, like, you're not working on projects in the same way, but maybe that's actually some place where we can really add to the conversation. That maybe applying to a job is not going to be just looking at like how do I maximize the number of applications I can get in. It's like how do I present my skills in a way that really can yield a different result and maybe can actually teach me something about myself and about the journey that I'm on. Because I mean, if nothing else, like trying to use this period of time to hopefully better one's skills and better one's like self confidence, I think it's also really important.
Yeah, totally. And so I think against this backdrop of severe anxiety and in some cases just giving up, of course, some of the recent speeches were a little tone deaf and were booed. I mean, the most famous one, let's tee that up from Eric Schmidt at University of Arizona.
Last December, Time magazine selected its Person of the Year for 2025. And this time, it was the architects of artificial intelligence. Interesting. So today we stand on this edge of another technological transformation, one that will be larger, faster, and more consequential than what came before. It will touch every profession, every classroom, every hospital, every laboratory, every person, and every relationship you have. I know what many of you are feeling about that. I can hear you.
I worked at Google earlier in my career. Eric Schmidt is a fantastic CEO, but extremely far removed from the everyday reality of young people. And I'm not surprised at the reaction.
We talk about all these different narratives that people hear about AI, right? It's going to take all your jobs away, or it's going to bring this nirvana. It's going to bring all these kind of uh, uh, medical innovations. It's going to solve world peace. It's going to destroy the world. It's going to cause war. It's going to cause conflict. It's in pretty kind of like alarmist, extremist, utopian. Like we are at every end of the extreme. And what's really difficult here is that oftentimes these claims are being made by CEOs and organizations that are not very well trusted in society right now, right? For any number of reasons, right? There's economic anxieties, but there's also just the fact that this is the same generation, the one that's just graduating, that was promised throughout their childhood that social media was going to bring about better connectedness. And what we've seen kind of time and time again is that we don't feel as if we are more connected to our peers. Sure, we have greater access to them and we can see the lives of other people, but many people just don't feel as connected as I don't know, as at least they felt like they were promised that they were going to be. And so when you're hearing all these different narratives, you don't quite know who to trust because you don't feel as if people have earned a lot of trust. It's one thing to say the right thing. It's another thing to have someone believe that what you're saying is both right and also what you believe to be true.
Yeah, and I would say, having been on the inside of these big tech companies, the intention was good, and
Yeah.
how things play out, especially with disruptive new technologies, there are unexpected consequences. And I think the key thing there is, as leaders, taking ownership for what's gone well and what hasn't gone well, and then also taking ownership on how are you going to make it right? What are we going to do? We don't have all the answers, but at least committing to listening and to trying and to having empathy for the people on the other side.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I really would encourage people to watch is the Eric Schmidt commencement had obviously the sort of negative reaction that made a lot of headlines. There was another tech founder, Steve Wozniak, one of the co-founders of Apple, that had a very positive reception.
You all have AI. You all have AI, actual intelligence. My entire life in the technical world, I've been following people that were trying to figure out how to make a brain, software or hardware, synapse chips. And I was at a company where the engineers figured out how to make a brain. Takes 9 months.
I love that. This is
I love
so
it too.
good. First of all, he's so humble. I mean, he's freaking co-founder of Apple. He could be such a jerk. He could be so arrogant, but he's not. In his tone, his demeanor, his dress, everything. So I love that about him. And then two is he talks about, of course, he talks about AI, but he talks about humanity. And that's what's been missing from almost every big tech discussion about AI is, what does this mean for our humanity and what makes us special?
Yeah, I mean, I just think about what is it that separates the companies that I don't know, that we trust versus the ones that we don't, right? It's the ones that we can feel some sort of connection to. And I think about why has Apple, of all the tech companies, been the one that's like generally kept up its reputation? Now, obviously, a lot of these companies have gone through ups and downs and have gone through fluctuations, but generally speaking, I think one of the ways in which they've really connected with people is just it felt as if, you know what, they get me, they get the creator. This tool will help me do the things that I really want to do and get me to the places where I really want to go. Let's go to the next clip here. This one should be Microsoft executive Mustafa Suleyman on the future of white collar work in an era of AI.
How close are we?
I think that we're going to have a human level performance on most, if not all, professional tasks. So white collar work where you're sitting down at a computer, either being, a lawyer or an accountant or a project manager or a marketing person. Most of those tasks will be fully automated by an AI within the next 12 to 18 months.
Well, that's certainly a pretty accelerated timeline that Mustafa has there. I'm kind of curious on do you think that's right? Do you think that's the right kind of conceptualization of how disruptive the technology could be?
Yes. I mean, I saw it firsthand. I lived it in my last 2 roles at Salesforce, and especially last year at Meta when agents started becoming viable. We were deploying them in different areas, and I saw my very best team members, leading, like, an organization of 1,000 people, some of my very best team members, and my own work getting largely automated with agents. It's like this, you feel radicalized. You never feel the same after you see that happen, and you start to understand, okay, this is going to be very disruptive. Not that we can't still find things for people to do, not that there won't be a new set of jobs on the other side that we maybe can't imagine today, but that the transition is going to be really rocky for a lot of people. I mean, I know for me, I just felt I felt kind of this anxiety and this depression for several months until I decided that I could do something about it, or at least try to do something about it with this foundation.
Yeah, so Claire, to your point, the one of the things that I'm really curious about when they're making these predictions about like wiping out entry level white collar work or even most white collar work is like the tech industry and software engineering specifically, it operates by like some kind of sort of stricter rules of engagement, right? It's operating under a set of languages that have rules um, that ideally these systems could figure out a little bit easier. Whereas, let's say, yes, law obviously operates by a certain set of rules, but let's say journalism, in many ways, it deals with a lot more ambiguity, right? Like we're on the phone with sources. Yes, we consider ourselves a white collar role because I mean we deal with computers, we go into offices, it's salaried work, but it's about building relationships with other people. And so that's one of the things that I think about in terms of like these predictions.
I think you bring up a really good point. I think there's certain roles and certain tasks where it's more easily checkable. So the code either compiles or it doesn't. It's either this level of efficiency or it's this level of efficiency, et cetera. And it is easier to create these reinforcement learning loops and have agents take on more of that because they can check their own work versus there's more subjectivity in areas like design or in journalism, as you said. I do think, though, there's a number of tasks that ultimately create each role. And I think a growing number of those tasks AI is just really good at. I mean, just think about what knowledge work is. Knowledge work, whether you're a journalist or you're a radiologist or whether you're a coder, is taking disparate sources of information and synthesizing and analyzing that information into some sort of conclusion that you then communicate out to some sort of audience. And so it just increasingly AI will take over more of those tasks and I think regardless of the role that someone is in, I don't know if anyone is safe from AI so much as that everyone has to embrace AI and continuously try out different models and figure out which models are good for which tasks and then which remaining work only they can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely at least the approach that I'm taking in the sense that like I care a lot about preserving a lot of the human aspects of journalism, right? The building relationships, the sort of analyzing the world, and um, oftentimes what people don't realize is when they think about bias in journalism, they think about it kind of on an individual story level. Where I actually think where like a lot of journalistic editorial thinking comes into play is deciding what to cover is as important as deciding how to cover something, right? my there are way more stories in the world than there are journalists to tell them, and then there are people to read about them, right? And so we have to pick and choose the things that are really valuable in people's lives. And I think there are certain ways in which we are going to be able to train systems to be able to say like, hey, in the past this is what we've really cared about. And so kind of use that as a boundary to be able to understand, okay, this is what we might care about or what people might find interesting. But I do think that there's like a special sauce that people have that is just really great at identifying like this is the stuff that matters in people's lives. And ultimately like a journalist tries to find that and also tries to find like, and these are the ways that we can I don't know, question our leaders, hold people accountable, etc. So I think you're right. I think there are a number of skills within most jobs that we are going to find a lot more efficiencies in, and we're going to find patterns that we haven't been able to locate before. Um, what I'm curious is like, how are we going to balance attaining those new skills while also kind of preserving and nurturing the things that make us really human? And as like Waz was talking about in the earlier clip, like we can try to replicate the human brain, but we also have them, right? And so there are things that we can do to augment its capacity, like kind of thinking of it more as like a bicycle, right? It's like what does it do with a human being?
I get a lot of inspiration from learning about Pablo Picasso because before
Mhm.
he did all of his crazy stuff, he really mastered the basics. I mean, no one can do a line sketch and a traditional classic painting better than him, but that's not where he stopped. He kind of went beyond and delighted and surprised us. He wouldn't have been able to do that if he didn't understand the basics because then that's just so core. And so I think about that when it comes to using AI. We first learn the basics manually so that we can review the AI. Then once we've mastered it, then we use the AI to kind of automate and shortcut those areas that we don't have to reinvent from scratch because it's just core, it's not differentiated. And we focus all of our human attention and creativity on being surprising on being scarce and on being social, which is a framework that Kevin Roose talks about in his book, Future Proof, which I think is a really great framework. And it's the advice that I always give the young people in my life is how can you be surprising? As a journalist, how do you go beyond the general set of questions that everyone would expect a journalist to ask of someone or choose someone to interview that isn't your run of the mill person for that type of story? How do you be social? Going back to your point about how do you develop those relationships as someone who will represent the story in an accurate way and build those relationships over time? And how do you be scarce and focus your time on the things that are hard to do versus AI has made a lot of what was previously scarce now just commoditized?
I think we're seeing these varying perspectives, obviously, in the way that different tech CEOs talk about this, right? Some of them are talking more about if you take that Mustafa angle, that it's going to wipe out a certain set of tasks. But I think oftentimes what it leaves out is humans are really creative, and they are searching for ways in which to uh, once they have a task that gets optimized in one sense, well, they have to occupy their time and their energy building new opportunities, building new capabilities. And I think what you see here is Bezos really has a kind of a counter perspective, right?
The reason they're afraid of that is because all these smart people keep saying that. So there are so many smart people, and they are smart, and they are saying, "Oh my God, there are going to be no more radiologists because, AI can read X-rays better than a radiologist can, and there are going to be no more software engineers because AI can program better than a software engineer can." These people are wrong. So what's really going to happen is that it's going to elevate all of these people, and there's going to it's like you've been digging. Let's say you're a software engineer, right? What it's the analogy I can give you is you've been digging out a basement for your house with a shovel, and somebody's about to hand you a bulldozer.
Yeah, so I agree and I disagree with him. I mean, we hear a lot of these very optimistic views from people like Bezos, from people like Elon Musk, who says that AGI will bring unprecedented wealth for every person on the planet. But exactly how are we going to get from where we are today, where half of US households are in debt, and so many young people graduating from college are starting their careers in major debt, unable to find good work to this future. I think those are the
Yeah.
specifics that really matter a lot and that we need to talk about. I think the other thing is that it's not just the number of jobs, it's the quality of jobs. And since it's Bezos, let's just talk about Amazon for a second. I was looking it up just before we started recording. Amazon today employs roughly 1.5 million people. Of that number, 1.1 million are in the US. Of that number, a million of those are working as warehouse associates, pickers, packers, and delivery drivers. And only 100,000 or so get to work in HQ in these high paying white collar jobs. And so if you are out in the warehouse, it's a rough job. I mean, you're making more than
Yeah.
minimum wage, but you are micromanaged to the minute by AI. Even how long you get to go on a bathroom break is micromanaged to the minute.
Yeah.
And everything you do is being surveilled. Why? Because the goal is to train AI to ultimately automate more and more and more of your job, including the ultimate, driving and delivery of all the packages. And so the question is, there's a lot of jobs, 1.1 million jobs in the US. How many of them are high quality, high paying jobs? And that's my concern about AI is that it creates this bad social dynamic of a very thin elite layer of workers who build the AI systems and train the AI systems, and then a mass group of workers that are being directed minute by minute by those systems. And I don't know if that's good for society. Just if we take a laissez-faire approach, I think that we can and should take a more opinionated view on how we can ensure that dignity and wages are more fair.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I'm reminded of a few so my perspective as someone who covered politics. I think about like a few clips that I've seen in the past. One of them was it was in 2016. Hillary Clinton goes to West Virginia, and it's a viral clip that comes out of it. She's basically asked by I forget if it was a coal miner or a coal miner family, and she gets asked like, "Are you going to ban coal? And what is it? What's going to happen to the jobs here?" And she says something to the effect of, we're going to retrain you all. And what was interesting in that answer, I am sure that the longer answer had a lot more context and nuance, but I think the element that a lot of people got out of it was that you have these workers who've been doing a job, who've had a profession that has fed their families, given them dignity. In some ways, it's been generational, right? Their parents or grandparents who are involved in it. It has been the lifeblood of a community, and all of a sudden you're asking them, hey, throw all of that expertise away, throw all of this knowledge that you have away, maybe in your mid 50s, maybe you're 10 years away from retiring, maybe you're even closer to retiring, and all of a sudden learn how to be a software engineer or learn how to operate more advanced machinery. Some people will adapt to it, but a lot of people won't. And I think we have to have a way of having a conversation. Now, obviously, we're talking to a lot of young people who are kind of at the early stages of their careers, and who are going to be able to make some sort of those pivots and those transformations into the skills that they'll use in their jobs for many decades to come. But I think a lot of the people who are middle aged, who are going to be seeing a lot of this transformation, like, we really have to just recognize that they've been active, productive members of society who've paid their taxes, who've really shown up in their communities, and all of a sudden we're kind of allowing these major companies to make big decisions, and they haven't really had a say in it. And I think that, I mean, anybody who's been willing to listen to me in the last year, I've been saying this and kind of shouting it from the rooftops. I think 2028 is really going to be the presidential campaign is not really going to focus on Donald Trump. It's almost entirely going to focus on what is the future of the workforce and, frankly, of society when AI is so much a part of it, right? What is our relationship to it, both in our work, but also in education, in medicine, and how we take care of our grandparents? It's rare that we have such a technology that, like, hits every facet of life simultaneously.
It's a defining issue of our time. There is no question. And I agree with you. It's very difficult for even really smart people to adapt. It's hard for me to adapt. It's hard. And it is slightly easier if you're younger, but only if we set the right expectations at a young age and when people are still in college. If you look at what happened in the 90s during the manufacturing shock with NAFTA and the WTO, and a lot of American manufacturing jobs, which were very high paying, moving offshore to Mexico, to China, to other parts of the world, it's shocking to see that at a time when the overall US economy was booming, that only 14% of displaced US manufacturing workers switched sectors successfully. 14%. And these are very smart people, but why? Because they were misled, because they didn't wanna move. They didn't wanna uproot their families. They were the pillars of their families and communities in many cases. They didn't want to take a lower paying job, which for many of them, if they switched to the service sector, they would have had to. And I think we're at that same inflection point for white collar work. A lot of people are getting laid off, and not everyone has accepted reality. They may be able to switch to another sector, but they'll probably have to take a lower paying job. And even more so once you factor in inflation. And what does that mean for the stability and the well being of our society?
Yeah, it's going to. I think it's. I mean, on an individual level, it's going to have really profound consequences to the way um, that families make incomes, that kids are able to pay for college, that whether or not there's enough of a return on college, and then just at a much bigger level, like, what does it mean for our political coalitions, right? We saw what it meant for the Democratic Party when a number of these jobs got outsourced. I mean, the whole industrial base really changed, and so I really think, I mean, you even hear about it in potentially automating semi truck driving, right? You have another population of particularly Republican leaning voters who are mostly men in their 50s who are driving semi trucks, and there's the possibility that some technologies, Tesla I mean, has a the Tesla Semi that's looking to automate what is otherwise a pretty good paying job that can send kids to college. And I think those consequences are pretty significant. And I'm perhaps a little bit more optimistic that politics is actually going to catch up to this. That a number of politicians are going to realize that, like, you cannot sort of beat around the bush or have kind of softer responses to this because they're going to hear about it from their constituents, right? And we're already seeing it with data centers. We're already seeing it with entry level jobs, and I think we're sure as hell to see it with more autonomous vehicles and autonomous systems and factory systems as well.
For us to
Um,
get through this transition,
yeah.
we're gonna need government to play its role, to listen to their constituents. We're gonna need private sector. We're gonna need nonprofits like what we're doing. We really have to lock arms and come together in a way that we really haven't for many years, and in a time scale that we've never seen before, because AI is just changing that fast. The numbers on the truck drivers and people who just drive professionally are really they're frightening. I mean, there's 2 million people in the US who drive long distance and regional distance truck driving. They are predominantly based in states like Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas. And in many of their towns, that's the highest paying job. These are the people who are donating to local charities. They're the ones who are buying homes, taking out mortgages. And so we have to be very thoughtful about how we transition. And here I am, in San Francisco, where there are autonomous Waymo cars everywhere. So the technology is there, and we need to be thoughtful about making sure that the legal, ethical, societal frameworks are kind of keeping pace with the technology. So, Gail, I'm curious, what are you seeing just talking to your friends and also looking at social media? How are people responding?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that we're seeing is people are going for quantity really over quality. And this is not to really diss on the quality. It's just a question of when you're applying to 40, 50, 60. I mean, we saw a clip earlier, 1,000 jobs. There's just no way in which people are able to kind of curate their and tailor their expertise. Now, maybe they're using AI and they're trying to they upload the job description, they upload their resume, and they say, okay, spit out why I want to do this job. I think what you're increasingly going to see is that there's going to be a bit of a gap there, right? Where the employers are going to know this is exactly what's happening, right? The candidates might not really know whether or not they're qualified necessarily for the different jobs that they're applying to. And so I think that is going to be a real interesting puzzle to fix. I think we're going to see recruitment is going to look very different because if it's so much easier to apply to a job, then they're going to have to find ways to be able to sort through who the candidates are.
It kind
We
of
have some
reminds me of
different.
online dating.
Yeah, no, literally, I think that's right. I think and one of the biggest frustrations that people have with online dating is if you can do it so easily, if there's no friction, then there really isn't any like care that goes into it, right? And not I'm not saying people should care a lot about the companies that they're applying to when they know that many of them are going to come back with a rejection. I just think if you want any shot at success here, I think it's going to be trying to build individual relationships with the companies. I mean, the biggest piece of advice that I give a lot of my friends who've been kind of starting this process is yes, at some point you do have to have some numbers, but you should be trying to find any possible mutual connections. Is it people in your alumni network who might have worked at a company? Can you start an introductory coffee or an introductory, like a 15-minute phone call? I take almost every single person who reaches out to me when I was working at NBC. Every single person that reached out to me and was asking like, "Hey, how did you get your job? How did you like? Can you help me kind of figure out how to apply for this thing?" Always took their call, always because that's what people did for me. And hopefully that's what people do once they get hired is that they make themselves available to be mentors, to be the sort of people that people can come back to.
Yeah, I agree with that advice is just making sure you're taking this quality first, targeted approach. I also think it's really important to acknowledge that companies today are looking for people who have already done something. I've seen this at Salesforce, Meta, at startups that I advise. We used to hire people based on potential, maybe where they went to school, maybe what their major was, maybe their GPA. But it is so easy now to build and actually do things with AI that the market has shifted to companies wanting to hire people who have been curious, they've built side projects, they have side hustles that they've done while they are in college. It doesn't even have to be in the exact space as the company you're applying to, but just to show both initiative and also familiarity with using different AI models out there.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think having a portfolio of work that you can show, but I think it's kind of like a two-stage process, right? It's the when you're initially applying, you want someone to actually look at the resume, and oftentimes, if you're just doing the easy apply, like I just know from personal experience, having heard from hiring managers and also seen it in the teams that I've been a part of. When we have a role go out, oftentimes you'll get 100, 200, 300 applicants for it. There's no way that a human being is going through all of them. Like, I think the person wishes that they could, but there's no way that you could invest that much quality. And so oftentimes what happens is you hear from a friend who says, "Hey, this person used to work for me. You should really consider them." And then that person goes to the top of the pile, right? It's internal referrals. It is those are the real mechanisms that people are actually landing jobs. And oftentimes when you talk to people, they will say, it was through a little bit of networking. And then the first response that I almost always hear from people, it's, but I don't really have a network, but I don't really have a group of people. I think that's really understandable. I think it's really easy to think that, like, it's always a function of, oh, it was nepotism, it was someone's parent, it was someone. That definitely does happen, but oftentimes people who come from backgrounds where they don't have a huge network, they build it, right? They invest time in relationships. They don't always go to people when they need something. They just nurture those things, right? And so, what are the sort of steps that you can take while you're in college? If you're listening to this and you're in college, maybe start that outreach when you're a sophomore to someone who works in a job that you might want to have, or who worked in a job that you might want to have in the future, and learn from them, learn about their path. And then when it comes down to 2 years later, when you're actually applying for that job, maybe they can be a referral, maybe they can be someone who can be a validator. And then I think once you get in that foot in the door and you're able to show the stuff that you've built or the stuff that you worked on, then you actually have a really receptive audience. I think it's both getting noticed, and then also once you've gotten noticed, you have to have the skills to really match up.
So, Gail, you showed me this video this morning, which I think is really bad advice. So why don't we play it and then let's talk about it.
What's your GPA? What's your GPA? At 2.8, but I got a 6-figure job right out of college. How? Because I applied to hundreds of jobs every single day for the last month. My friend who works at Meta showed me this trick, and this is exactly what got me and her our current jobs. This is the website, it's called Sprout, and make sure that I upload my resume. And in your settings, make sure that you have your AI cover letter and resume toggled on. Now, every single time that you want to apply to a job, all you have to do is click right, and it will apply for you on the company website with a tailored CV, so you're really not doing any work. This is exactly what saved me.
I wonder whether she's kind of the exception to the rule, or this is something that people might begin to do more of. It reminds me a little bit of when I was applying right out of undergrad. People were advising us to copy and paste the job description on LinkedIn in white font on your resume in like point 0.5 font. And so the algorithm would basically just like regurgitate it as a perfect match, because it was like, oh my God, you're using the exact same language. And people started doing that. And it was, my worry is that the more you focus on this quantity over quality, you're gonna really, well, one, you're not gonna get great results, and two, you're gonna begin to really think that, like, oh, then surely the only way to keep doing it is by continuing more and more quantity, and you're gonna keep on getting those rejections, and it's gonna feel absolutely miserable. And so, can you nurture individual relationships to your benefit? Is kind of not just to your benefit, but also to the benefit of you and the other person.
I mean, I can empathize with where
Yes.
this woman is coming from, right? Because it does feel overwhelming. So you got to have to. It's like cat and mouse. If all these companies are going to put AI in front of their process, then it could be a game of numbers. I mean, it's hard. I think it is a good idea to optimize your resume, your LinkedIn to get noticed. You have to get through the filter. It is a good idea on top of that to make sure that you're trying to network your way into that company and take a targeted approach. And certainly you need to use AI as part of your process, such as to tailor your resume. And by the way, I never looked at cover letters when in any of the roles that I've hired for. So depending on the industry and role, I don't know how important that is. But to completely automate the process, it's kind of like automating your homework in college. It doesn't really show any differentiation if lots of people are doing that. And from the employer's perspective, it's always so obvious when someone has done that, and you just kind of mark that as spam, and then you're kind of blacklisted from that company.
I mean, think about it. It's the first impression that you're making to potential employer, right? And if that first impression is, "Hey, this is a important task, but I'm only willing to devote a certain amount of attention to it," then like I don't know what is that saying?
Yeah, it's a good example of doing human in the loop, right? So here's how I would do it. I would use AI to figure out which set of companies are a good fit for what I'm looking for, and to give me feedback on realistically what the gaps are between my dream job and dream employer and where I am today. Because I think that's important to just set the right expectations. If I've never studied anything about aeronautical engineering and I expect to get hired by SpaceX, that's probably not realistic right now. But maybe AI could coach me on what I need to do to get from where I want to be or where I am now to where I want to be. So then you identify your target list. And then I would use AI to research each of those companies and specifically the hiring manager, the department, to understand what the company really does, who are their customers, who are their competitors, what are their struggles. If they're a public company, there's even more you can learn about them because they have quarterly earnings where they have to share this with investors. So I would read those earnings call transcripts. I would use AI to help me understand those and refine what ideas that I can bring to the table and bring to them. And then I would do that targeted outreach, reaching out in a bespoke way to each of those hiring managers. I do think that targeted approach, it might take more time up front, but you'll yield
Yeah.
a better result.
Absolutely. And it'll show them that you're gonna be that type of employee, right? The one that's not gonna do the same thing that 100 million other people have tried, right? That to do the easy apply, right? I mean, easy apply, I know one of the clips that we saw, like, was they were saying that's not really applying, right? I mean, that's just showing your application, and maybe someone will get a positive outcome out of that. But can you show them that you've done the legwork for the job is I think really at the core of it.
Yeah, it's like online dating. It's like sending a generic message to 100 people to go out on
Yeah.
dates versus saying, "Hey, I really noticed this about your profile, and this is why we are a good match for each other." So this has become such a big issue that even the Pope has weighed in. And by the way, I'm very proud that Pope Leo is from Chicago, which is my hometown. But this is Gael. You want to tell us more about this and roll the tape?
Yeah, so this is the Pope put out it's something called an encyclical. I was not super familiar with papal encyclicals before, but I did a little research into it. He timed it exactly 135 years after the church's historic mandate on industrial labor rights. So he is framing AI as an industrial revolution of our time, right? And he takes a pretty strong stance, but I also want to say that he does it in dialogue, and he does it in dialogue with Anthropic and one of their major executives, understanding that the basically he describes the church's role as unique in terms of setting sort of a moral foundation. Now, not obviously not everybody is Catholic, but to just put out that this is the position of the over billion Catholics in the world, or a position of the leader of over a billion Catholics in the world, and that governments and other institutions have a role to play. And so this is kind of his call to action for them.
Artificial intelligence needs to be disarmed. The word is strong, I know, but deliberately chosen because this moment needs words capable of attracting attention, awakening consciences, and indicating paths forward for humanity. Artificial intelligence already touches many areas of our lives and affects decisions that shape human coexistence. It is also dramatically changing how war is waged. Like the earlier Leo, I feel entrusted to look upon another huge transformation with eyes of faith, with lucidity of reason, with openness to mystery, and with cries of the poor and the earth resounding in my heart.
I think that what we're seeing with AI today is very akin to the Industrial Revolution. And just as then, we needed dialogue, debate across public, private, secular, religious society to come together and develop the idea of unions, of child labor laws, of the New Deal. We need that equivalent today. And I like to think that we're doing a small part of that in our work with the New Work Foundation, but we just bringing everyone together across policy, academia, public and private sectors.
It's wonderful to see that a leader of such a large community is kind of speaking about the importance of getting this right. And I also think about what we were talking about before about community. A lot of people are feeling really lost right now. They don't know who to trust. They don't know up from down. They don't know whether or not their job is going to exist or whether they're going to be able to find a job. And to have a leader that they trust not give answers, but give like frameworks of how he's approaching something. I think it's a really unique approach that I'm excited to see how many people kind of it resonates with.
Well, we covered a lot of ground. Gael, great to have you join and have this debate about what's happening. To all of you who are graduating or soon to graduate, congratulations. The future is bright, and we're going to help you navigate it and make it brighter. And for those of you who are still struggling to find your next role, please check out our job agent, check out our other episodes with Dear CC. We want to provide the AI tools, skills, and information to help you succeed in this era. See you next time.
Thank you, Claire.